Hello, welcome to Hack School 3. Today we're going to be building user interfaces with React and Next.js. Okay, and please quiet down. Thank you. Here are some important links. If you want the slides, just put that URL to your browser. I also put it on the Discord, so you can just press it from there. And then, as always, the GitHub is acmurl.com/hackschool. Okay, before we get started, let's run the following commands to obtain the starter code. This might look familiar from like previous workshops, so we're gonna come around and help anyone if they need any help. So yeah, let's do that right now. Okay, if not, we're gonna get started. So here's the timeline. After this workshop, we'll be halfway done with Hack School. So first, we're gonna be talking about what we did previously in Hack School 1 and 2. So in Hack School 1, if you remember, we went over HTML and CSS. So let's just go over some basic HTML tags. So if you don't remember, HTML is kind of like the structure of the web page. So then some basic HTML tags that will be useful in today's activities would be, the first one, as you can see, would be the image. In the image tag, you can see the source, which would be the picture. And you can see the picture we chose is the picture on the right. And then in the alt, in case the image doesn't load, we'll have a string saying the image isn't loading. And then the next tag we'd go over is the A tag. In the A tag, we have our href, which is our hyperlink. So then this allows us to have hyperlinks on our web page. And then next to the hyperlink, you can see the text that will show up. And then next we have H1, which stands for header one. It's just the header tag, and it has a different styling compared to the P tag, which would be the paragraph. And then something that we didn't really go over, or we did go over, but we kind of brushed over in High School 1 would be the form. We're going to go over that a little more in today's workshop. But for now, let's take a look at it. And then for this one, the input type is text. So then here, you'll be able to put text in. And then the text is what shows up in the box. And then let's go over CSS styling again. So like I said, previously HTML is kind of the structure of the web page. So in order to style it, we would use the CSS style sheets. So then here in our example on the left here, we have the HTML code for our box right here. In order to style it, we would have our style sheet and then have the name of the class, which would be style box. So here, as you can see, for color white, it turns the text color white, and then the background color is just orange. And then we have position relative, which allows us to use attributes like top and left to adjust the box 100 pixels from the left and 50 pixels from the top. The margin basically just adds spacing around our attribute. Since we didn't specify margin top or margin bottom or margin left, it's just like everywhere there's 50 pixels for space. And then padding is kind of like the inverse of that. It allows spacing, as you can see here, in the inside. And then border radius, if you remember, it just allows us to round our edges. And then display inline block keeps our style box centered and in the middle, or the text in the middle of the box. Okay, so in Hack School 2, we went over arrow functions. Arrow functions are a crucial part of JavaScript. It allows us to write functions that look like this, and it will be useful for us in the later activities to make our components. So let's just familiarize ourselves with the syntax. So normally we would create a function like this, but then using arrow functions, we can make it into this and shorten it into this if it's only one line. Yeah, so here's the syntax. Let's go over the document object model, which is the DOM. The DOM is a tree structure representing web pages. And then inside of the tree, there will be HTML elements like nodes. If you don't know what nodes are, the picture in the next slide will kind of explain it a little better. But for now, just know that JavaScript can interact with the DOM to change the web page structure, like adding elements, editing the content, or deleting elements. Something cool about the DOM is that since each element is a DOM, each time you edit the DOM, it doesn't change the whole page. It only updates the DOM itself, so it allows for faster run times, basically. So, but yeah, for now, just know that this is how the browsers sees your web page under the hood. Okay, and here's the picture I was talking about. As you can see, this is the DOM tree structure. These tags are from HTML. These should look kind of familiar. So inside of the head, we would have the title. The title would have the name of the title. And then here, for example, the body would have, like, let's say, an A tag with the href and the text. And then here would be H1. Okay, so after review, we're going to talk about React and JSX. So what is React? So React is a JavaScript framework used to build user interfaces. So basically, it allows us to have component-based elements in our web page. So it allows us to change the visual layout and state management of those components. State management we'll talk about later in this workshop. So yeah, so here's a picture of what React is capable of doing. So each one of these are components, and we're able to write JSX code to modify these components. And then, so what is Next.js, right? So Next.js is a framework on top of React that allows us to build more efficient web applications. React is used to build the user interface, but then it adopts Next.js features for routing, data fetching, and integrations. So it allows for a easier and faster full stack web application in the end. So as you can see in this picture, Next.js combines all of these to form one web application. Here's just a general Next.js project structure. If you were able to successfully merge the part3 branch, you'll see that you have like a bunch of new folders and files. That could be daunting at first, but here we kind of break it down. Like most of it is kind of like the essentials of a Next.js project. And then besides these, we also have a couple of other files needed for our starter code. So yeah, if you ever have a question about what each file does and what it's used for, you can just refer back to this slide. And then if you want a more in-depth overview, you can go here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about JSX. So JSX extends JavaScript to allow for HTML-like elements. So basically, it creates React elements in the form of something like this. And keep in mind that this is not HTML. It basically describes the look of the user interface, and it edits the DOM and displays the elements. So here is example of JSX code. So inside of this JSX component, we have this JavaScript syntax of declaring a variable. But instead of having JavaScript code here, it's HTML code. It basically allows us to have DOM components that uses HTML. And then just another note on JSX, you can put variables and other JavaScript expressions inside React elements using braces. So for example, here we have a variable named name and it has ACM hack, but we can call this variable in a different component like so. And this is useful when we want to use components within another component, which we'll see later. And then you might think that JSX and HTML are pretty similar after what I just said, but I'm just going to note some key differences. So starting from HTML, HTML is a tag-based. It's tag-based. So here, as you can see, we have the div, images, the p tags, like we talked about before. And then external components like the CSS are put into this head tag. So in order to get the style sheet, we would have to do something like this. And then a key drawback of HTML is that you cannot reuse HTML code. So every time you want to do the same thing over and over again, you would have to copy and paste the code. So that is solved in JSX. Since JSX is component-based, external components like CSS can be imported. So as you can see here. And then instead of using class inside the div, we would use class name, since class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript. And then each component returns only one DOM element, as you can see here. And then, like I mentioned before, JSX is reusable. So components can be imported and exported elsewhere. As you can see here, after you create the component, you can export it here. And then if you want to use it in a different file, you would import it at the top. And then here's just a side by side. As you can see, the way to import the style sheets are different. And then the comment is also different. And just how we use class in HTML and class name for JSX. And again, JSX code is reusable. I've been talking for a while now, so let's do a quick pop quiz in your group. Discuss what are the differences between JSX and HTML, and select all that apply.
We talk in your groups about this. You can just talk, bounce some ideas off each other. You can look back on the slides. Some of the questions are like, it's like, we want to teach you more stuff, so you can kind of just give your best guess and yeah, just talk in your groups about it.
Okay, let's review things by down. Okay, so let's go over each option one by one. Does anyone have an idea for A? Is it true or false? And you get candy if you answer. Yeah, that's correct. As you can see previously, how I mentioned, right, the differences between using class and class name, that's already one thing that makes the statement false. Okay, so let's do B. You. It's false. I don't think it's the other way around, but it is false. Yeah. 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 Okay. So anyone for C? Oh yeah. Yeah, that's correct. I mentioned that in one of the previous slides about using the curly braces. So yeah. D. Yeah. So that's something we didn't really talk about, but you should know when you're writing JSX code, everything should be in camel case. And then camel case, oops. Camel case basically looks like what camel case is on the slide right there. So that's what camel case is. Okay, so let's briefly talk about modular CSS. Basically, what it is it allows us to have individual style sheets for each one of our components. So doing so allows us to have class names that are scoped locally, and it solves the problem of accidentally overwriting styles from different components. So basically what this is saying is that each component has its own style sheet. So in cases where, right, there's multiple class names of dot container, it wouldn't, and you only have one style sheet, it wouldn't know which one to use, and then you would probably accidentally overwrite something, right, and have the wrong styles. But doing so here allows us just to have class names that are scoped locally, so each style sheet is with each component, and then some example code of how we would do that. And then keep in mind here, when we are importing styles from our style sheet, inside the class name, we have to have the name of the import and then the style. Okay, so enough talking, let's get to our first activity. So using the welcome page we made in Hack School 1, we're going to turn the HTML code into JSX code. So just a hint, the CSS code can be reused here, and then HTML code just needs to be changed up just a little bit. And then so let's navigate to our index JSX file and let's try that activity. Okay, let's come back together. Quiet down, please. Quiet down, please. Okay, thank you. Okay, so here's how we implemented it. So as you can see here, inside of the home component, I'm gonna just zoom in. Okay, so here, in order to get our containers, we're going to copy it, basically.
I just wanted you to zoom in.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so that now looks better. So basically, this is pretty similar to what we had before in our homepage, except we got rid of the nav bar because since we're using components now, we can make the nav bar a separate component, so we don't have to write the code here. So in activity 2, we're going to be making the nav bar. So for here, we're just going to work with the trip containers. Mainly the difference here between HTML and JSX is, like I mentioned before, we use class name instead of class. And then for the style sheet, in order to use it, here we imported it for you. And then to use it here, we have to do the curly braces, and then style dot the name of the element that you're styling it on. Yeah, so that's what it would look like. And then for the style sheet, it should be the same CSS. Here's what we did. And then once you run it, it should look something like this. Don't worry if you can't copy the code right now. We'll post the solutions tonight, so you can take a look at it then. Okay, I'm gonna pass it over to Angela, and she's gonna talk about components.
Yeah, so Nathan previously was talking about the differences between JSX and HTML. And I think the main difference when we think about React and how it uses JSX is everything is in components. So we can think of components as independent and reusable parts of the UI or the front end of a website. So when you think of like different parts of a website, like the nav bar and the footer and then the main content, each of that is a component in React. And there's a lot of reasons why we want to use components. As Nathan previously mentioned, it's reusable. So then I think the example that I've been using is just, if you think about how we can have like cards, like profile cards, you wouldn't want to just like HTML, like copy and paste like this one profile card that's like, you already styled so well in the CSS and you just keep copy and pasting it. So basically React with components, you're able to reuse them and you can just import them wherever you need them. And then later on, we'll cover props, which is how we can change the information. Since if you think about profile card, if you just copy and paste the same one, you're gonna have the same name, same picture, same like description for each person. But when you use props, you're able to change the name, you're able to change the image, but still keep the same styling of like a card component. So, and it's also, we'll later mention in future workshops, we'll cover it in Hack School 5 with MongoDB, how you can use like the props. And then our last workshop, we'll talk more about states. And if you think about state, the easiest example that they usually use in React is, if you think about button that has like the number of times it's clicked, then every time you click on a button and update the number, that's updating its state. So that's a very simple example. It's like every time you click a button, it'll just like +1, so +1 click. And we'll go over this more in the last workshop, so you're gonna have to wait a bit for it. We'll cover just the basic parts of React today, so just each of the components. So here's just an example of how components are used in a very popular website. So if you notice, I've been playing music on Spotify this whole workshop. So in your groups, discuss what components you think Spotify uses. I've highlighted a few, but you can always like call out more in your groups. But just think of a component as just like a part of a website and how they can be used in a website like Spotify. So just go in your tables and discuss for like 3 minutes. Okay, we can just wrap up the activity now for our discussion activity. So I just wanted some people to shout out what kind of components you see on Spotify, on the website, and then if you raise your hand and name a component, Nathan will give you chocolate. Anyone? If you get more chocolate, Alexa?
Like the song name and the company name.
Yeah, so yeah, that's like one component for sure. So you can see I highlighted it. So each of those cards is one component. So it has like the image, it has the playlist name, and then like a little description of what the playlist is. Yeah, you in the back. The header, yeah, for sure, yeah, like that little nav bar that Spotify has. I don't know if it's really a nav bar, it just has like the login button and the sign up and like the logo. But we're actually gonna be working on that for our next activity, the nav bar. So yeah, you can see like each of the buttons is actually its own components. Which I will talk about later, how you can nest components within components. But yeah, like, if there's no one else, I'll move on to talking more about functional components. So in React, there's actually two different components. There's class components and functional components. We don't cover class components because it's very deprecated. I think if like a software engineer is still using class components, they really shouldn't, because class components are stateful, which is a lot harder to manage and require like just like more code in general. But we're only going to be talking about functional components. So I previously mentioned like state for a component. So state, like functional components are stateless. So they essentially just display the data that you give it. And when we talk about prompts, they'll also like display any prompts that you have or any variables like your name that are like different for each component. But it's different from like, if you want to add state, like my button example, where you're able to like change what's on the screen and like everything like that, you have to actually import use state for React, which we'll talk about in the last workshop again for Haxel. So you're gonna have to wait a little bit, but I think interactivity is the main thing that is very important in React, but unfortunately we cannot cover it in this workshop. But if you think about the homepage that we just built, that was actually a functional component, since you aren't able to really interact with it. It's just like a static page, just like static HTML if you think about it. But it's essentially a component just because it's displayed, it's like part of the website. And you can just see, again, I put up the syntax again for a component in React. So you can see how it's using JavaScript. So it uses like the constant profile, and then it uses the arrow function. Right now it has no variables in it, so that's why it's like an empty like bracket or empty smooth bracket. And then you're returning just one div, which is the main DOM element. And remember in React, you have to wrap everything into one div, since it can only return one DOM element. And then in the div, I just put an image and a paragraph tag, which has just the image of the person and then the name of the person. And then like I previously mentioned, you can nest components. So if you think about the page that you made, that was like one component, but on that page, you're able to put a lot of different components within it. So here is just like a simple example I came up with, which is a profile gallery. So the profile gallery is one component that you can add to a website, but within the profile gallery, I put 3 different profiles. So right now, again, since we're not using props, you're only seeing like John Smith and the same image on each of the different on each of the profile galleries. So we can think of the profile gallery as this parent component, and then the child components are all the little components within it. So you can see how I'm importing profile from a components folder, and I'm able to use it just like an HTML tag, where you can do like profile and then use like the end bracket. And you can see I added a link to the React Playground demo where you can mess around with it if you like. You can see here in the app.jsx page, this is the main page that we're using. And I imported the profile gallery here. And then I just use it like a regular HTML component. Okay, and then you can see within here, I have profile.jsx, and this is my profile component, and I exported it so that I was able to use it in the profile gallery. But you can just see, I just use like an image and a paragraph tag, and I just returned all of this into one div. And then in profile gallery, I just have each of the different profiles, and I just did some simple inline styling. So it's just like a flex, just so there's like a little bit of a gap, so everything's not just like squished together. And then you can just see, I also exported the profile gallery, and then that's how I was able to use it in app.jsx. So again, you can like play around with it. You can see if I like delete one of the profiles, then it should, why is it not deleting? Okay, maybe React Playground is not being very nice today, but yeah, in general, like, if you were to delete it, it would just show the two images and the two like John Smiths. So now we can move on to finally building our navbar component. So if you look at the file called in your components folder, it should just be in the navbar folder. It's just like index.jsx, since that's one way you're able to simply just like when you're importing, just do like import and like component/navbar, and then it's able to like React can just figure out that, oh, you're trying to import this one file. But yeah, you'll be working on this file and you'll just be making your navbar component. And it's very similar to the home page, where you're like gonna return like one div, and then you're taking again your navbar code from the HTML workshop. And if you don't have access to that for some reason, you can always reference our GitHub, since we always push the solution into our GitHub repo. So you can check like the part 1 branch if you need the code for a navbar. And then again, we're just changing the HTML code to be React. But there's also another element to it. You're gonna use the Next.js link component. So when you're becoming a software engineer, or if you want to just be a good coder, you're going to end up having to read documentation a lot on the job or just in class. So just so you guys have some practice with it, we just linked how you would use the link component. It's very similar to a tag in HTML, but we just wanted to see if you guys could just like read documentation and learn how to use the link component when you're making the navbar instead of the a tag. Since links are optimized this way in Next.js, I'm not gonna lie, I don't know the exact way it's optimized, but it does help with optimization in Link.js or in Next.js because of the routing system. And another bonus is you can use the Next.js image component, and they optimize Next.js images in a way so that it's rendered on the server before it's rendered on your client. So that it like makes it load faster. So yeah, you can use that as well, and I'll link the documentation on the slide. And just so a reminder of what it should look like, it should just look like this once you add it to the pages underscore app.jsx. So this is how we're able to display it on every page in our website. So you can kind of have documentation how to import and export components if you're confused, but just so you guys are clear on which page to do it, it should be on this page, and I just added comments for where you should be importing your navbar. But this essentially just allows you to see the navbar on every page. For like when we work on the add certain page, you'll still see the navbar. So now we can just go ahead and start working. Okay, we're just gonna wrap up the activity. Don't worry if you weren't able to finish yet. We're gonna be going through the solution, and let us know if you have any questions while we go through the solution. You can always like raise your hand. So let me just pull this up. So this should be the code for your navbar. So as you can see, we gave you a lot of the imports already for like images or links and like the styles. And so the main thing that you had to do was remember to put your return, since in React, you have to remember to put return, so you know like what the main DOM element you're returning is, so React can return basically all of this. And you can see how a lot of it is very similar to your navbar HTML file, but again, we just changed everything so that it's JSX appropriate, so everything that, I think previously this was an IDE, and if you saw the slide, I said, we're just gonna change all IDs to classes, because it's way easier in React to use classes than IDs. And the difference is pretty negligible for like classes and IDs. So you can see here, again, we use the brackets for all the modular CSS styling, and then we tried to keep the same class name, so .navbar, .title, and then the main difference here, which is with the link component. So the link component is very similar to the A tag, like I mentioned before. So instead of doing like, for example, like href, you just had to do link href. And once you looked at the documentation, you probably saw that it's very similar, like you can just also add like what the link would be, so like hack travels for this link. And if any of these is a bonus or wanted to see how the bonus was done, so this is how you would use images in Next.js. So I think the one wonky thing about images in Next.js, this is just to help with its rendering. You have to specify the width and height, which you usually don't have to do for like images in HTML. But it just uses this so they kind of know what the width and height of your image is before, so then it can help it render it faster. And then, but everything else is very similar. You would just use the source again. And then for the pathing, again, it's a little different with Next.js. Hopefully the documentation mentioned it, but everything that's in your public folder, you can just use slash and then the name of the file. So our image file was travel.png. So you're able to just do like slash and then travel.png. So anything that's in the public folder, you can just do like slash and then put the file name. And then you can see here in the href for hack travels, I just put a slash. So that represents just the home page. So if we clicked on hack travels here, it would just redirect to just localhost 3000 where we have our thing currently hosted. So, and then everything else is pretty standard for the other buttons for the other pages. So here we have slash add trip. So that's how we link to pages in in JSX or Next.js. So here we just have very similar, like if you do add trip, then it goes to the add trip page. And right now it's just like a blank, like H1 tag or H2 tag. And then trip activity should have like just also just like a very blank, like HTML, like H2 and like a paragraph tag. But you can see how in the top here, it adds the slash add trip. So that's how Next.js does pathing essentially, it just adds it. Like when you go on a website, it's like slash profile or like slash about, it basically just adds it like that for the link component. Were there any questions for this part for creating the nav bar? I'll just like go on. It's like, just so you guys are all aware, just looking at the coding. And just remember also, we already provided it for you, but whenever you're making a component in React, remember to export it, because that's how you're able to export it in a different file. And then also the style.module.css, you can see it's just in the same folder. So all the styling, again, make sure you use the dot for classes. So you're still using the hashtag, that's for IDs. So you have to change that if you're wondering if your style is breaking or anything. But all the styling should be the same as the HTML one, except I think I just added one thing. If you wanted like more spacing, I just used like display flex and added a gap, just so the image for the logo and hack travels wasn't like completely stuck together. And then again, what if you did all of this and you're like, where is the nav bar? I still don't see it on the website. So we said in instructions, you have to go into the pages folder and underscore app.jsx. And you have to import the nav bar from the components folder. So in Next.js, they also have it set up where you can just do like an app, and then you can access anything in the src folder, so the source folder. And then you're able to just do like the pathing like slash components. So you go into like the source folder, it's like the component folder, and then you can just do slash navbar. Since as I mentioned previously, in Next.js, they're able to just like differentiate like, oh, if it's index.jsx, then you can just put the folder name essentially. And then you just have to add the navbar like how you would for a HTML component if you think about it, because it's just like same brackets, and then you can just do the end tag like this if you have nothing in your component. So you could also just do it like navbar without and just do like the end tag like this, and that should be fine as well. And you could also probably just use absolute like pathing if you wanted to do this instead, but this is just a shorthand of doing it in Next.js. So any questions about the importing? Hopefully everyone was able to create the navbar and everything. Just like a quick check, who was able to create the navbar? Just like raise your hand. Okay. Any questions or like, we can also give Candy if you like want, just like letting us know like what you're still confused about, like anything in React that's particularly confusing. Okay, well, we'll just move on to our last activity, and just like when we're walking around, you can just let us know if there's anything you still need help with. So our last activity, we'll be working on the forms that we were talking about in HTML. So I know it was the last activity in our HTML workshop, so we weren't able to code it up for you properly. But we're just be doing it this workshop, and then you can just code it up and like do it in React, so you don't have to like do all the replacing like with the class name and everything. But just a quick review on forms. So we're just gonna show you how forms are in React, and they're really similar to HTML forms. You can see the same like syntax with like class name and the styles that we have for all of GSX components. But then the main difference is instead of for equals, which we use for labels in HTML, you have to do HTML for, and that's part of like the JavaScript camel casing. Like they just want you to do like kind of like two words, and then like one's like lowercase and one's uppercase. And then you see here our label for our input is just destination, so that people know to put the destination of their trip. And then the input type is just text, so it's just like a short response. And then the name is more just like when you're doing like the JSX or JavaScript part or any interactive part, you can like reference it as destination. And then required just means that if the person tries to click submit, then it would like error out. It was like, oh, you're required to put this like the destination field, and then it won't let you submit the form. And then the button is just like the button, then type in submit. So then when you click on submit, then it will submit the form. And then just like add trip is what is on the button. And then just to cover some things you can do with forms, some input types. So we don't need to use all of these for the forms that we're creating for our travel journal, but just to cover some ones that you might encounter when you're making your own projects, you can use like date and text. So date and text are the ones that you'll be using for this form. Date just allows you to put in like the month and the day and the year, and it makes it just very easy for anyone who wants to like create dates in a form. And then submit is just like, again, like I said, you can just like submit your form with the submit type. And then checkbox is just you see in the image, like check a box, like yes, no. You're able to do that with that input type in HTML. And then inputs are usually used for short responses. As you see in the first image, you can do like email, file, like anything that's like pretty short response. If you have a longer response, which for a journal entry, you will want like probably to like yap a lot more about what you did on your journey. So you can use text area, and this is a multi-line text box. So then you're able to kind of expand the box and then write as much as you want. And then the last thing that we haven't covered is just drop down. So this is particularly important if you want to add trip activities, since we have you select like a rating for your activity 1 to 5, and that's a drop down. And then you also can select the trip that you're on. So to make a drop down in HTML, I'll just tell you what tags you kind of need. So it'll be the select and option tags. And it's the same as in React as well. So I just use HTML and React interchangeably because they're very similar. But you see like what the dropdown can look like. So select is what you wrap everything with, and then options are each of the different options. So like in this example, it's the option USPS, UPS, and FedEx. And we have documentation linked on the slides for the trip activity. If you want to learn how to use like select an option. So we can just get started on our add trip page. So this is the page where we're gonna have people add their trips, and it's just a form. So you would create a component in add trip.jsx with the form destination, start date, end date, and journal entry. And just some hints, you should definitely use form, and you have to use label, input, and HTTP. I don't think you use HTTP since we already gave it to you. And then button for submitting the form, and then text area for like the longer journal entry. But once you're done, it should look something like this. We gave you all the styling already, so you don't have to worry too much about the CSS, but if you do want to change it, you're free to change it in the trip form.module.css part. So here, we already gave you all the styling. If you're curious, you can let us know if you want to like for us to explain anything in the styling, but you shouldn't have to worry about styling for this activity. So it should just be in pages folder, and you just have to add your code here with the form. Okay, so you guys can start working now. Good. So we're just gonna wrap up the activity now since there's only 10 minutes left, but first thing I wanted to do is just for you guys to take a feedback form so we can help improve the workshop for Express and MongoDB and the next 3 workshops. Since we're in the midway point, we really appreciate the feedback on just like what we could be doing more about for Hack School. And if you do fill out the feedback form and show us, we'll give you chocolate. So then it's all anonymous too, like the feedback form. So don't worry, we do not know who's submitting. Yeah, so like if you want chocolate, just raise your hand after you finish filling out the feedback form. It just helps us with improving the workshop series.
Can you hear us? Evan?
Yeah, I think I'm just recording audio. It's gonna be an interesting edit. It's gonna be interesting.
I just listen to myself, but we can go on to the next slide.
Yeah, you just have to record something for like, I think you can cut maybe the activity portions.
Oh, really?
It should just be like a 40-minute. Okay, so now we'll just go over, hopefully everyone got the chance to scan the QR code for the feedback form, but we'll just be going over the solutions for add trip. So as you can see, we're just using the add trip JSX and we're making a form. So if you looked at the trip mod form.module, you can kind of get a hint on what class names to use for the styling. So we used .trip form for the main form div, or not form, like the form tag. And here we have just a label for destination. So this is the hint when you are on the slide for the form. We use the destination input, so we kind of gave you that one. And then for the start date, as I mentioned before, for the inputs, you can change the type. So here we have type equals date, and that's how you're able to create dates in React or HTML. And here we just have the end date, very similar, but just like the text that's displayed is end date instead of start date. And then the last one is just the journal entry. So this is where we did text area. And again, like I mentioned, text area just allows you to have like a multi-line form. And here we just have our button that right now it doesn't do anything, but eventually once you input like the backend and the MongoDB database, this would add your trip to the database. But right now it's just a button that's like type submit. And you can see how it looks like in our local hosts here. So yeah, it's just a add trip form, and then you can put in like the destination, and then you can select the date, and you can see how HTML already has like the little calendar for you. And then again, you can like select the end date, and then put in your journal entry. And again, it's a text area, so you can see you can like expand it and everything. And then there's just the button. And again, this page doesn't do anything right now since we haven't inputted the backend components, but eventually you'll be able to see all your trips displayed on this page. And if you're curious about the add trip activity, we don't have too much time to go over it, but we will release it when we release solutions, and then you can copy and paste it. But it was very similar to the add trip page, except you just have to use like select and then put your own like drop downs. So it's a little bit more challenging, but we'll release the solutions at the end of the workshop. So that's pretty much it for the end of the workshop again. Thank you all for coming, and remember to fill out the feedback form so we can improve the next 3 workshops for y'all. And I'll see you guys next week. Now I'm gonna do the feedback form. It's like, raise your hand if you complete the feedback. If you try. Are some gonna do a bonus activity? I saw one.
What's the bonus?
I think so. In like, do they?
This? Oh, wait, I think someone was doing that.
Recording?
Okay, actually, I'm surprised how's you on this.
But I think like once you, not gonna lie, the part where you do it part before, so you can, again, just like make it.
Yeah.
1 minute. So. I should not have just eaten a sandwich for lunch.
There's pad thai for you. They're probably cold, but
It's okay, I think I all of these. I forgot to share my screen. That's not good. I did not. Okay, that was bad. I did not. It says, I was a little curious why this wasn't there, but okay. Oh,
we can redo the whole thing.
yeah, it's like the slide.
Oh,
It's like editing.